the best possible outcome we can see, unless you favor complete and utter anarchy and elections being canceled and being meaningless going forward, is that the military does their deed and saves the republic. Because that's what we're really talking about here. We're talking about the collapse of the republic. And this is going to be prevented, in my view, by the people of the U.S. military. Because that is their purpose. And I believe they will do their job.
They said on the news today that they're putting strict limits on cash transactions. So everything will be tracked, supposedly to keep us safe.
I know. It's not fair. Isn't each person's privacy their own business?
And I heard the new Fed coin means you can't withdraw your money anymore. You're trapped inside their system, where they can use fees and negative interest rates to take your hard-earned money.
Oh my. People work so hard for their pay, and now they won't be able to hold on to it.
And the central banks are saying they're planning this global financial reset, and all the countries are going to have to go along.
I feel for every family who just want to be free and just keep what's rightfully theirs.
Oh, and all those hard-working folks who contributed to Social Security throughout their working lives are going to get back way less in these digital credits, not even enough to live on.
Oh my gosh, people who counted on that are going to be hurting even more. They need to know how to protect themselves.
I'm just so glad we preserved our money in real hard, precious metals. And it's so good that I can now sell gold and silver to help other families ensure their future.
Oh yes, I'm glad too.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance and Reluctant Preppers. We have a returning guest who is always a favorite of our viewers. This is Rob Kirby. He's the founder of KirbyAnalytics.com. He joins us this Friday, December 4th, 2020. Rob, as always, thanks for coming back on.
My pleasure, done again, and Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. We are in the season of Advent right now. We're awaiting, and this is the beginning of a new year in that regards. In fact, we're awaiting the light, and oh boy, have we got a lot of darkness that needs light shed in it. We were just talking, you and I, a moment ago about the obscurity around what the truth is about our presidential elections in the U.S. and what that portends, and about fiat versus Bitcoin versus precious metals and so on. So I guess let's just start from there. Let's just start from the as you called it, a dumpster fire of uncertainties that we're facing right now, and let's just pull apart the biggest burning chunks of that and just look at them briefly and bring our audience up to date. It's been about 3 or 4 weeks since we had you on, and let's just take those one at a time in any order, because they all just seem to be, in conflagration and parallel right now.
Yeah, well, we can start wherever you would like to start.
Okay, well, let's deal with politics and move that aside, and we'll talk about real things. So we've got this. Your take from the Canadian side of the border, looking at our U.S., you had made a rather provocative comment to me recently about your concern. We were talking about what is going to bring resolution to this upside-down, chaotic situation that we find ourselves in. Your view of that from Canada?
My view of it from Canada, what has actually occurred, in my view, is shameful. The evidence of fraud, which the mainstream media or the dinosaur media keeps saying there is no evidence of fraud. The evidence of fraud is it's astounding. It's blatant in your face, and it's rude. And the election was fraudulently executed. With ballots and with computer programs, shaving votes, moving votes around, false false ballots being introduced to the stream after hours when they said that they had quit counting. I mean, it's a complete and utter disgrace, and the media has tried to name Biden the president, or they've given him the moniker president-elect, which he is not. And I mean, my personal view is that the only way this is going to be settled is with the military. And the reason the military will do this is that the Democrats under Biden are attempting to steal the republic, and the Department of Defense is sworn to uphold the republic. And you see, the Department of Defense, my view of it is that your Department of Defense does not care about Republican or Democrat. They care about the continuity of the republic. And it just so happens to work, this time around, that Trump represents the republic and what is fair and just. And my view is that the U.S. military will not, under any circumstances, allow Joe Biden to be seated as president, because he didn't win. He plain and simply did not win the election. Trump won the election with an overwhelming majority, and it's being stolen from him currently. And I believe that the military will intervene and will prevent this outcome that looks and is being preached to us by the mainstream media, that this will happen. An interesting sidebar I'd like to bring up, and I've heard this mentioned in other interviews that I've personally watched, but it was 4 and change years ago that a fellow by the name of Cliff High, who I'm not sure if you've interviewed Cliff in the past.
No, not on this channel. Yep.
And his webbot, his predictive linguistics, when it used to work before the internet became heavily censored, in the wake of the last federal election in your country, the internet became a much more censored space. But prior to that, when the webbots were giving accurate, very predictive and accurate readings on what's going on in this world, Cliff High had a vision, and when I say a vision, his webbots, he used to put his findings out in what are called alta reports, which were the results of his webbots scrubbing the internet for these predictive signals. And it was 4 and change years ago, he had a vision, or his webbots were giving an indication that a time would come when literally half of your Congress would be incarcerated, would be under arrest and being held for crimes against the country. Well, he was off by 4 years. You see, the thing with Cliff High's webbot stuff, it's not necessarily very accurate on the timeline, but the big picture, he tends to get it right. And I think what we are headed for in a military resolution, all in the name of defending the republic, I can see wholesale arrests being made of not only Democrats, but Republicans too, people that have been on the take and have been taking money from foreign actors, trying to basically interfere with the political goings on in your country. To me, it's very clear that this has occurred, and I can see Trump being the guy who actually puts an end to all this crap and actually drains the swamp. That's why he was elected in the first place. And I think Trump's in a position now where he'll play that card. I really truly believe he'll play that card. And whether or not Trump wants to play that card or not, the military is going to play the card anyway, because the military's sworn job is to defend the republic, and they will. And right now somebody's trying to steal it, and the military is going to say, no, you can't do that. Not allowed to steal the republic. Can't happen. Won't happen. That's my view. I might be wrong. Well, but that's how I see it.
It's certainly of grave concern to all of us who live here, and probably to everyone around the world in that regards, because if we don't have open and honest elections, if we don't have elections anymore, we don't have a republic anymore, and we're just a third world country. And then where does that leave the rest of the world? So it's of serious concern to, it should be, everyone in the U.S. and for the good of themselves, their children, their grandchildren.
Donegan, it has to be of concern to everybody in the world, because your currency unit, the U.S. dollar, is the world's reserve currency, or at least currently it is.
Yeah.
And, if that situation is to remain, I don't believe that we can have your republic being stolen. Doesn't work. Doesn't fit. They're not congruent with each other. A nation who has basically said elections don't count anymore is not a worthy candidate to be the possessor of the world's reserve currency. Plain and simple. It's economics 101. Can't happen, won't happen. But that's why your country has the military. And the military will defend the republic, I believe.
You mentioned the economy, and I wanted to turn our attention to that because you're the one who told us, gosh, it's been a long time now since you brought this up. You said, we'd run off the cliff as Wile E. Coyote and there's nothing but air underneath his feet and he hasn't fallen yet. And we're still seeing the suspended reality persisting. What's your view? Do you have any new analysis, new research, new insight on the true state of the affairs on the ground for the global economy, and what you think the macro factors are that are going to take us to that next step?
Boy, where the equity markets and equity valuations are hallucinogenic as far as I'm concerned. We have half the economy shut down, and we have the stock market making record highs every day. And that doesn't work very long. I mean, that is incongruent. Record equity prices when half the economy is locked down and businesses are closing at a phenomenal rate is not an environment where equity markets should be going up. The reason they're going up, Donegan, is because money is being printed at levels which nobody can wrap their head around. Because let's just say the 4-ish trillion that the Fed's balance sheet has expanded by, officially expanded by.
The public-facing balance sheet, yeah.
See, there's a lot more money at play than the acknowledged money creation. And to get one's head around that notion, you should be following the work of Dr. Mark Skidmore and Catherine Austin Fitts, who have, Skidmore's most recent work deals with Social Security trust accounts, where we have an asset pool of retirement assets. These are the funds that are used to pay pensions of retirees, government workers, and the like. And we have seen turnover using the government's own data. Like one fund under the Social Security Trust umbrella, one fund has $32 billion in retirement assets. And in the latest reporting year, they had a turnover of $12 trillion in notional on a $32 billion asset base. Like, think about that churn. whatever's going on there, it isn't management of retirement assets, period. Because that is to me, that's evidence of fraud.
Hey, how about we cancel all IRS audits and direct all those brainpower against auditing that department?
Well, they don't give explanations. And let's just say that the turnover among the Social Security trust apparatus, you have many tens of trillions of churn occurring in these accounts. Like, I think the total, or what's observable and measurable using government's numbers, it's something up in the magnitude of $40 trillion of churn on a comparatively ridiculously small amount of assets that are creating that churn. That is a smoking gun, in my view, that criminality is in play, and most likely, very, very most likely, tens of trillions of extra money has been created off book. And this is why, despite all of the technical analysts who called major tops in the equity markets, and despite fundamentals that have probably never been this bad ever for equities, the markets continue to go up, and interest rates remain glued to zero because debt is being bought off book and it's being memory hold. There's way more money in play than what is acknowledged. End of story. And anybody who believes, published aggregate monetary data from the St. Louis Fed, who are the keepers of monetary aggregates in America, if you really believe their take or their presentation on what and how much money is in existence, you are sadly mistaken, because the evidence is just screaming that there's tens of trillions more in play, as evidenced by the government's own reporting in their Social Security trust fund accounts. You can't have churn of $40 trillion in the Social Security trust fund arena on the monetary base that is alleged to be real. It doesn't work that way. So, any more than I can put the Titanic in my bathtub. It doesn't fit. And the amount of money that we have evidence that's churning in the economy makes a mockery of published data regarding monetary aggregates. And, the funny thing is, I'm sure, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, most people would have said, well, Kirby, you sound crazy. That level of fraud, how could that happen? Well, my attitude is, look at your freaking election. What do you mean it can't happen? It's happening in spades all around us.
It's happening in spades. It's happening in our faces, and we're not the mainstream media are not covering it, and big tech is censoring anybody who even wants to talk about it. Exactly. We've had personally and acquaintances and others who even try to share links or share stories, and those things are not allowed to be shared either. And when you search, you won't find those results coming up either. You'll find the exact opposite. And if you do manage to get access to one of those articles, even if it's about sworn testimony, sworn affidavits, physical evidence, eyewitness testimony, there'll be a disclaimer pops up and it gives you the counter argument and says, go here for the real story.
So. There you go. Yeah, false news, fake news. Fake news is, it's in your face. Fake news.
So you talked about political fakery going on. You've talked about fiat fakery going around. Let's talk about the antidote to that fiat fakery, which is anti-dollar.
The anti-dollar trades.
And we were talking about that and how, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, Dunnigan, I've been saying to you for a very long time now that I favor the anti-dollar trades. And I said that I believe that the anti-dollar trades will be led by a crypto advance. And the rationale for that is that the powers that be would prefer a digital currency outcome rather than a return to hard metal. They make no bones about saying they disfavor a precious metals standard returning to our monetary affairs, and for the time being, they get to enforce their beliefs through infinite selling of futures contracts on the exchanges, namely COMEX and LBMA, which are also fraud scenes. These are crime scenes. Calling them markets is a ridiculous moniker, but the metals have been suppressed for a very, very, very long time, and despite being suppressed, they've managed to break free somewhat of their shackles, because the price of gold is up close to all-time highs, which isn't really all that meaningful when things that people make comparisons of it to, namely cryptos or Bitcoin, if you want to use a specific name, like in the last 3 months, Bitcoin's doubled and gold's down $100. Despite that, metals are still an amazing place to be, because when this geopolitical nonsense settles, and it will settle, there's going to be, it used to be, it was a conspiracy theory, Dunnigan, to talk about a reset, to talk about a reset in monetary terms. Now we have world leaders talking about reset, the IMF talking about reset. I mean, are they conspiracy theorists too? Don't think so. So we're going to see change, in my view. And when we see this wholesale change, my belief is that the suppression of precious metals will very likely be abandoned. And the people that have been doing the suppressing will probably become buyers themselves, if they already aren't, behind the curtain. So metals will have their day. It's just that one needs to grow a set of patience to be in the space. But metals will shine again. And right now it's predominantly the anti-dollar sentiment is expressing itself currently in the run-up in cryptos, specifically Bitcoin.
This is the second time you've mentioned with us, because in your last visit you talked about that, about cryptos leading the metals. It hit me in a new way today, the way you said it, when you said they would, the powers that be and the central banks would prefer a digital currency to something, to then returning to something real. And all of a sudden my mind flashed back to an interview we had with U.S. former Representative Cynthia McKinney, who said that the selection of the voting machine technology was already years ago determined to be subject to manipulation and fraud, and therefore an alternative was brought out by a mathematician, statistician, who said, look, here's open source code solution, which would be transparent to all. If you really want to have a machine, you should have this code because it's open source. And no, in fact, they purchased, not only in the state of Georgia, where she was from, but all over the country and other countries as well, this not open source, this proprietary, secretive code that's not that way.
And why do you think that happened, Dunnigan?
Yeah.
It was chosen. It was chosen for us. Mm-hmm. And currently, at the moment, cryptos, call it Bitcoin if you want, but it's bigger than just Bitcoin. But cryptos have been selected for us, just like Dominion voting machines were selected for battleground states because they could be manipulated. And I mean, it's in your face how brutal this is. But anyway, the monetary aggregates, as they're presented to us by officialdom, are literally horse feathers.
You mentioned in passing a reset. Nitro Burp asks, Rob Lagarde, the giraffe, mentioned that reset in January of 2014. The Economist magazine had an article back in 1989 about one world currency in the year 2018, but perhaps in 2016 Trump upset the apple cart. Now we see the central banks in Europe being firebombed while they try to push this reset thing. It apparently has evolved. What's your take on the reset now? And I think you've been talking about that, but
I mean, the reset probably comes into full bloom very, very soon. Should Joe Biden become president, because that would symbolize a globalist win. But I don't think the story's going to end that way. You see, I don't think Trump's leaving the White House. I think the military is going to ensure that the election and the republic are saved, and the rightful winner of the election remains in the White House. That's what I think will happen, and I think that puts this whole reset. It's like throwing all the balls up in the air, and where they land, I don't know. But to me, it would symbolize the possibility that a reset is delayed somewhat from the standpoint, for the New World Order, for the globalists to achieve a reset and a move to digital currency, they need an America that follows that narrative. And I don't believe with the dirt that's been dished up to Trump, I don't see him following anyone's lead, because the people that have been setting the pace or the narrative are not for Trump. And there's going to be blowback. There's very likely going to be civil or uncivil actions taken. There's probably going to be bloodshed, because the people who have committed the crimes are all in. And I mean, once you've committed, in my view anyway, I'm just saying, in my view, the Democrats and a lot of Republicans too, because there are a lot of rhino Republicans, and that's a Republican in name only. They've committed treason against your country, and they're going to be dealt with. And that's why that's maybe the one positive aspect of having the military your country has, because they will defend the republic. And my personal view is all of this activity is ongoing right now. It's all occurring. There's been rumors and talk of rendition flights that have been occurring. And if you don't know what a rendition flight is, you might want to look it up and read a little bit about that. But there's rumors that many people in positions of authority in America have been taken on rendition flights, because people are reading the riot act to them that, the military complex in America has information and has the data and has the records of all the crime that's been committed by people in positions of power. And, the taking of money, the giving up of national secrets, the writing or steering the legal apparatus in America to positions that favor foreign countries. It's off the charts, and people are going to be held to account, in my view. And so it basically, it's like taking the barrel of balls concerning the reset and throwing them all up in the air. I don't know where they're going to land yet, but I'll tell you what, you're going to do well if you have a generous representation of the anti-dollar trades in your portfolio long term.
You typically have insight into and acquaintances that you connect with who have visibility into the large-scale transactions and availability and supply and demand going on within the metal space. Can you bring us up to date on what you're hearing about the dynamics?
Physical silver is extremely difficult to procure in any kind of size. Gold is more available today than it was 4 months ago in physical form, but large amounts of gold are still problematic in terms of sourcing for procurement. So, but you'd never know that, of course, if you looked at what's going on COMEX or London, because they sell infinite amounts of paper every day. And you see, the cryptoverse does not have an equivalent in terms of a derivatives complex. I mean, there's one cryptocurrency that has a futures contract, and that's Bitcoin. And it's a very thin, basically it's a pretty thinly traded contract in Chicago. And the notion that they could use that very thin market to control the entire cryptoverse, it doesn't work well, because it's sort of like if you want to think about filling a pool, you can fill a pool with 8 fire hoses. You can fill it very quickly. I'm just going to say the precious metals pool has big hoses connected to it through COMEX, through LBMA, but the crypto pool, it's as big or maybe bigger in terms of numbers of different currencies, because you have your Bitcoin, you have your Ethereums, you have a host of different cryptocurrencies, but that pool only has a very thin straw to fill that pool, and that's through the one very relatively small contract for Bitcoin that's traded in Chicago. They don't have the ability to suppress cryptocurrencies the way they can suppress precious metal. That will change at some point, I believe.
Back to the relationship between fiat and the other anti-dollar, the metals, we have a question from Vamilams, who says, in your opinion, what would happen to the price of gold if physical cash is canceled by the powers that be?
Well, I mean, if physical cash is completely canceled, what will we measure the price of gold in? I mean, if the dollar is no longer, does gold get priced in Bitcoin? Does it get priced in? It presents a really big conundrum. Really, what do you price gold in if the dollar isn't? Does that mean the dollar or gold gets priced in euro? Does it mean that gold gets priced in a new currency that we have never heard of at current time? I don't know. The answer to that is I don't know, except I do know that gold and silver will always be in demand in physical form because it's treasure. Mention the word treasure to somebody, and what do they think of? They think of gold and they think of silver. Some people might even say, and diamonds too. But I mean, there's a reason why gold and silver are called precious metal, because they are universally adored and universally viewed as, and they have withstood the test of time as a means to preserve purchasing power in the face of monetary debasement. And we are seeing that in spades. Do gold and silver, in terms of their nominal pricing, have some catching up to do? You betcha. And they will.
Back about fiat currency again and the cashless specter of the future, we have a question from Brian Jenkins. The U.S. and the Banking for All Act seem to have pushed for a digital U.S. currency with accounts for each American held at the Fed, monitored by the Fed. What would happen to all the U.S. currency held by non-Americans, particularly those outside the U.S. who hold U.S. cash?
Well, in my view, they'd be relegated to something called being bag holders. And when you're a bag holder, it usually isn't to your advantage, because, being left holding the bag, so to speak, basically means that you've lost. You've lost it all. And I mean, a hyperinflationary outcome to this whole ridiculous financial malaise that we're in my view, is a guaranteed outcome. I mean, does it really matter? I mean, if you've read the last page of the book, and then you go read the rest of the book, you might have a different view, or you might have a different appreciation for the content of the book when you know how the story ends. Well, I believe I know how this story ends, and the ending is hyperinflation, and not a deflation, as some people would have us believe. But with the amount of money printing that's already occurred, much of it unacknowledged, guarantees that this ends in a hyperinflation. So people that are left holding endless amounts of dollars ultimately will be bag holders. People that have redeployed their cash into things like physical metal, gold, silver, and cryptocurrencies will fare immensely better.
And I guess other real assets, land,
sure,
and
productive land,
etc.
Fine art,
real things,
anything tangible that's desirable.
Interesting question. Continuing on this vein that we're on right now about the impact on ordinary people, John Ghislaine asks, are bank bail-ins a moot point now, with so much flagrant monetization of debt, which you talked about from Dr. Mark Skidmore and Catherine Austin Fitz's work? The only point of bail-ins seems to be simply about punishing everyone, just like the lockdowns already have.
Well, I mean, you can only be punished if you're holding dollars. I mean,
in the system, I see. Yeah, okay.
If you're holding physical metal, and if you're holding cryptocurrencies, they are by definition outside of the banking system. And that is the point to having assets outside of the banking system. You don't leave yourself in a position where you'll be a bag holder. Because if you have substantial assets outside of the banking system and the banking system collapses, the people that have the exposure to the banking system, as in fiat money in accounts, will be bag holders. Because that's how that story ends.
Yeah, this is something my wife and I talk about, and I talk to clients about this on a weekly basis at least, and that's this mindset that we've been brought up with. I don't know how many generations this goes back. I know it doesn't go back forever, but for generations it does. And that is the notion that money is numbers on a bank account. So if you have money in the bank, then that's put away and safe. But if you spend it on something, then that's spending. So if you want to be a saver, you put numbers in your bank account. And if you want to, and you don't want to be a spender, you want to be a saver, for people who feel like that sense of protection. But it seems like that's just a twist, a distortion. The instinct is correct that to save is good, to have a rainy day fund, to have a reserve, to have a financial fortress is good. But that idea where we got it distorted from, no, like if you spend it on precious metals or a productive ranch land or something real, that's not spending. That's just a different savings. It allows you to protect your nest egg there rather than being subject to the risk that's in this thing that now we've been taught for generations is going to be a safety. Can you talk to us about that mindset of where real money is?
The mindset that people, I think, get stuck in, Dunnigan, is people tend to believe their leaders and tend to believe when they say that they're printing X amount of money, that they're being halfway honest. But the reality is, you see, I think prior to this election, people probably used to have much different attitudes and opinions about the electoral process. And by the time we're finished with this dumpster fire of an election, people are going to think much differently about elections. So, the preconceived narrative or the preconceived myths of elections, I can assure you, will be much different if, as and when there is another election. And so, rules, there's cliche sayings, rules are made to be broken. Well, narratives are created to be supplanted by the next narrative. Just like in the history of monetary affairs for human beings, different currencies have been the global reserve currency at different times. My guess is we are at a point where there's going to be a change. And I'm not even necessarily saying I know exactly what the change is going to be, but there's going to be a change. And we are going to have a new reserve currency. Whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's metal, whether it's a basket of goods, commodities, I can't say for sure. But the change is coming. And so what are the contenders to replace what we currently have? I mean, at the front of the pack are the precious metals and the cryptos right now. And that, in my view, is where you want to be for insurance and safety. Because, the alternatives are, I guess you can say, well, I'll take my chances with owning Amazon or Google or, all of those companies, like whether it's Google and Facebook and Twitter, I believe a lot of these companies at the end of the day are going to be broken up and that's going to come, ultimately it'll come from probably a revamped or reworked Justice Department once this dumpster fire of an election is finally put to bed. I mean, what has to happen here? I mean, use your common sense. These social media companies, who are the biggest companies in the world right now, they conspired to see to it that Trump was not reelected. And that can't stand, and it won't. Any more than the dollar can stand with the debasement that it's faced. It just won't happen. And I mean, in my view anyway, like I'm at a point where I view the best possible thing, the best possible outcome we can see, unless you favor complete and utter anarchy and elections being canceled and being meaningless going forward, is that the military does their deed and saves the republic. Because that's what we're really talking about here. We're talking about the collapse of the republic. And this is going to be prevented, in my view, by the people of the U.S. military. Because that is their purpose. And I believe they will do their job. So, sorry, Joe Biden, you're not going to be in the White House. You might be in the big house.
One thing we haven't talked about is we've talked about many markets. We haven't talked about real estate. Susan Black asks, I plan on eventually converting some gains in gold and silver into income-producing assets, such as rental real estate. Do you have any other suggestions for income-producing assets? And regarding real estate, do you think real estate prices will crash? And if so, what would be likely to trigger the decline in real estate prices?
Well, my view on real estate is that currently real estate prices are very frothy. And by most metrics, in my view, real estate prices can't really go higher unless incomes are incredibly elevated from current levels. And with the economy half shut down, and with the prospects of somewhere between 18 and 38 million people losing their moratoriums on being evicted for non-payment of rent and mortgages, my understanding is somewhere between 18 and 38 million individuals will be subject to evictions as of January 1. And that's only now, 4 weeks away? Because the government candy bowl, is dry. It's the candy, they've given the candy out, and now the bowl is empty. And unless there's a new spending bill to keep these people from being evicted, there's going to be massive, massive waves of evictions occurring. And that can't do well, that is no good underpinning for real estate prices to go higher. People who own second and third properties, if their places are tenanted by people who don't have jobs and don't have incomes, what are they going to do? Do we all go down together? Or do people get evicted and people try to find a new warm body to occupy that can pay rent? Big issues coming. Money printing is like a cocaine high. Not that I've done cocaine, but I mean it's a ravenous high. But then there's the come down from the high, and we haven't had the come down from the high yet. But that's coming because the candy bowl is empty, and it either gets replenished, which has repercussions.
Absolutely.
I mean, if anyone's paying attention to what's going on with the dollar, the U.S. dollar, the Dixie index, is hugging, multi-year lows right now, like as we're talking. And, a new round of monetary largesse, a new round of ravenous spending on the part of the feds in your country isn't going to do anything to repair damaged confidence in the currency. And confidence is damaged in the currency. And you can see it playing out every day when the dollar makes new lows. Mm-hmm. I mean, and at what point can America no longer have the appearance of being able to sell their debt? If the dollar isn't wanted, it makes issuing record amounts and increasing record amounts of new debt. It makes the sale of it in international markets very difficult. So that's where we're headed.
There's a question here just to wrap up that takes us way back to a story that I haven't heard you tell, but our reviewer is requesting if you'd tell it again. Brother Nine says, can Rob tell us the story of the golf game with his brother and some UBS bankers some years ago? I've been listening to Rob's interviews since gold passed $700 an ounce, and I think there are many listeners that would enjoy the anecdote.
Yeah, that's a true story. Playing golf years ago, my brother and I were playing at a club that he's a member of, and we teed off as just a twosome or two people playing, But we hitched up with an elderly gentleman on the third hole who asked if he could join us. He had been playing by himself, and he was a retired former chairman of a Swiss banking corporation in Canada. And we got talking on the at the tee boxes each successive hole, and we started talking about markets. And my brother and I were, let's just say, newly minted gold bugs, and we were telling him how excited we were for the prospects of gold going forward. You see, and at that point in time, gold was $300, or rate around $300. It might have been $290, and it might have been $310. But we said we really think that gold and silver, precious metals, are the place to be going forward. And this Swiss gentleman said to us, if you had any idea of how much interference there is in the gold market, in the pricing of gold and the pricing of silver, if you had any conception the length that the people who control those markets go to suppress their prices, I don't think you would be nearly as bullish of precious metals as you were stating. Well, lo and behold, we were both right. He was right because the suppression has been an ongoing fight with precious metals. But on the same hand, I mean, gold then was $300. Gold today is, I mean, rounding off, let's say $1,900 or whether it's $1,800. So it's gone up by a factor of 6. I'll just tell you, in the ensuing time, real estate has not gone up by a factor of 6. It's maybe gone up by a factor of 3. But I mean, gold's done pretty well. So we were quite accurate to be bullish of precious metals at that time. But he was also correct and giving us, a seldom seen gust of truth from somebody in the banking complex who knew the dirty work. He grew up with it. He knew, he was well aware, a Swiss banker, a chairman of a Swiss bank, knows what's going on in the precious metals arena. So, like I say, we were both right.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that.
But the winning trade is to hold the tangible.
Ah.
And it still is.
If people want to follow your work, where can they find you, Rob?
You can catch me at kirbyanalytics.com and at fine locations such as yours. Whenever we get together to have a chat.
In the finer stores worldwide. And folks, you notice that when we have Rob on, he's quite unabashed about tackling sacred cows. So we want to support that. We may not be able to get away with that forever. If we lose touch with you, where will you find us? You'll want to make sure that you go to libertyandfinance.com now and go over on the left-hand margin and put your email address in. Sign up for our free newsletter at libertyandfinance.com. Free newsletter comes out 3 times a week. It'll include all of Rob's interviews and descriptions and links, all the other guests as well, and that way we'll be able to get a hold of you if we lose this platform. But Rob, as always, on behalf of our viewers, I thank you for joining us here on Liberty and Finance.
Been my pleasure, Dunnigan, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you and to all of our viewers.
Absolutely.
If you've decided that now is the right time for you to protect your family's financial future by acquiring physical precious metals, gold and silver, I'm delighted to let you know that I have now become a licensed dealer's representative for Miles Franklin, one of the oldest and most trusted names in bullion dealerships. And we can provide you with physical delivery to your personal possession or to professional vault storage or precious metals IRAs. Just email me at libertyandfinance@protonmail.com, and please include your name and phone number in your email to libertyandfinance@protonmail.com. We'll get right back with you and find out how to best meet your needs so that you can either begin or increase your acquisition of physical precious metals now and protect your family's future starting today. acquire gold and silver, just go to libertyandfinance.com. When the main site comes up, click on bullion sales. That's libertyandfinance.com, bullion sales. You'll see my name, Dunnigan Kaiser, my phone number, and my associate, Kaiser Johnson, his phone number, our email, libertyandfinance@protonmail.com.